Yep, you read that right. In SMITE Conquest, the highest win rate team composition is 1 Guardian and 4 Assassins, but before you start insta-locking Loki ADC, some context.
Today, we become legends.
This information is handily collated by SMITE Master, a site that presents all kinds of SMITE data such as win rates, pick and ban rates, and most importantly for this video, composition win rates for Conquest, which I thought was super interesting. I'm not affiliated with this site in any way, I just find this sort of SMITE data to be very intriguing. So first up, that title is technically correct, but doesn't really tell the whole story. While yes, the technical highest win rate composition for Conquest consists of 1 Guardian and 4 Assassins, the data for this specific composition is very minimal, and while it's a funny outlier and a great title and thumbnail for a YouTube video, I wouldn't personally recommend running 4 Assassins in your regular team comp. That is, unless you want to dethrone this comp by losing most of your games by running it. But there are a ton of interesting data points and conclusions we can draw from this kind of data that I didn't even know existed until now. So to be more sensible, let's start introducing a minimum game limit for these comps, starting with 100 games minimum. This still isn't a great sample size, but we can find some funny oddities here, and I'll be showing a more representative sample size later on. So the top win rate composition with this minimum game amount imposed is actually one with an extremely high sample size, and that's 1 Guardian, 1 Hunter, 2 Mages, and 1 Assassin. This comp has a sample of over 76,000 games, almost 10% of all games covered, so this is a very popular composition you've almost certainly run into yourself more than a few times. The notable thing here is of course the double mage, and interestingly this comp still includes a hunter, so this data isn't actually your standard mid laner with a magical ADC that we've been seeing a lot lately. This comp style is more likely a hunter in the ADC role as normal, mage mid, and then mage solo or mage jungle. For junglers, it's likely Ao Kuang or Hebo as they're very popular and strong right now, and for mage solos, it could be really any of the ones that work there pretty well. Using SMITE Master again, we can browse mage solos by pick rate and see that the 5 most common are Hades, Ao Kuang, Anubis, Zhonghui, and Chang'e in that order. The only super interesting one here is Anubis, the rest are all somewhat known to be decent solos. With Hades of course having it as his main role and being extremely popular and strong at the moment, arguably the best solo laner in the game, also the highest win rate solo in the game. Other options for this comp could involve hunter mids with a magical ADC and then a mage jungle or solo as listed before, but these are probably quite a bit less common given how most popular mids are mages, but hunters absolutely do work there, they're just less popular. But this is a pretty normal comp, hence the almost 10% representation. Let's move into some more wacky ones. Right below it we have Guardian, Triple Mage and Assassin, which has a much lower popularity, only 3,600 matches, roughly 0.5% of all games, meaning you only see this comp on average 1 in 200 games. This is likely a wackier variation on the previous comp, where you not only have a mage mid and mage solo or jungle, but also a magical ADC instead of the hunter. This comp in reality isn't as weird as it looks given that magical ADCs exist, but 3 of the same class is always going to make an interesting composition for Conquest. With this one having presumably the jungler as the only physical damage on the team. Risky as the enemy tanks can stack magical defense pretty safely since assassins don't do great into tanks unless it's something like Kali that can shred them. There's also a more popular but slightly lower win rate variant of this comp with the Guardian switched for a warrior, presumably in the support role, but this could also be a mage support such as Iset, Nox or Baron with the warrior and solo. It makes sense for this one to be slightly higher win rate given it has a bit more variation in the damage output. The warrior can add a little bit to the assassin and it's not quite as crazy for stacking magical defense. This comp also has more samples than the previous one at 7,500 games or roughly 1% of all matches running this comp. This is strengthened by the 8th highest win rate comp, which is the same again but with a hunter instead. Most likely with a mage in support, mid and solo, assassin jungle as with all of these, and hunter ADC. This comp has an even higher popularity than with a warrior at 8,500 games or 1.1% of all games. Yep, a comp with no traditional tank is over 1% of all matches. Again, there are probably other variations of these comps that I'm not listing, but I'm trying to present the most common setup for these and not explore every possibility, or this video will be very long. Sticking with the theme of many mages though.
Mages. Mages.
We have probably the most extreme comp on the highest win rate list, and that's Quad Mage 1 Assassin. Yep, the 4th highest win rate comp, even with a minimum sample size of 100, has 4 mages in it. In fact, 6 of the top 8 have at least 2 mages, and 4 of the top 8 have at least 3. For this comp specifically, it's most likely to have the assassin in jungle with every other role filled by a mage. This sort of makes sense, as if you ever wanted to run a comp with one class, mages are the way to do it because of the way they cross class boundaries. There are specifically designed magical ADCs that work like hunters and even a magical assassin in Ao Kuang, while there are also more solo focused mages like Hades or Zhonghui, and even some mages that do really well in support like Iset, Nox or Baron. This comp could also rock the assassin elsewhere though, like in solo or support, but I think the most common setup would have the assassin in jungle for this one. The final interesting comp here is Guardian, Triple Hunter, and Assassin, which has a very low sample size, so take it with a grain of salt, but presumably this comp runs Hunters in ADC, mid, and solo, since Hunters really aren't viable supports or junglers for the most part, though I'm sure a few of these 133 games are running them in weird roles. Jumping up to 1,000 matches minimum, we basically see the mage infestation. While 1,000 games is the minimum, most of these comps have at least 3,000 games, and 6 of 8 of them have 3 mages. Most of these comps have over a 0.5% representation, which is pretty substantial, and so I'll let you draw your own conclusion from the fact that out of 40 roles to be filled, 22 of them are mages in these top 8 win rate compositions. Are they a broken class, or is it simply their flexibility that's showing here? Let me know with your thoughts down below. But maybe you aren't looking to win games, but actually to lose them. So let's look at the other side of the coin, the lowest win rate compositions you can find in Conquest. The data for no match limit is pretty useless here, as many of them don't even have 5 roles listed, so I'm assuming they're for matches with someone not connected at the start or just oddities in general. At a 100 game limit though, we see the worst win rate comp by a decent margin at 35.6% is Guardian, Triple Warrior, and Mage. When looking at the lowest win rate, it's a lot harder to discern where in hell these classes are even going on the Conquest map, since they're clearly not designed to win. But for this one, I would assume we have a warrior in solo and jungle, which is pretty normal, and then one somewhere wacky like ADC or mid. Could also be a warrior in support, but then your Guardian has to go somewhere like ADC or mid, so really there's no way to make a feasible team from this, and it's probably why it's the literal lowest win rate comp in Conquest that exists. The next lowest is Double Guardian, Triple Mage, which actually does have some sensible layouts. The 2 Guardians can go into the 2 traditional tank roles, support and solo, while mages fill out the final 3 roles as they were doing in the highest win rate comps, a mage ADC, mage mid, and mage jungle such as Alquang. While this comp does seem pretty sensible, the major problem with it is that you're all magical, and so the enemy team could just absolutely stack magical defense on your ass and probably win that way. That's most likely why this comp has such a low win rate, despite being fairly sensible in terms of roles. These comps all have very low representation in general, which is most likely because they clearly suck. But a noticeable trend when compared to the high win rate comps is that mages drastically fall off while warriors and guardians make up most of the spots. Mages go down from 22 out of 40 in the top win rate comps to just 6 out of 40 in the low win rate comps. With 8 being an average representation, we can see that mages are underrepresented in these bad comps. In fact, all damage rolls are, with assassins at 5 and hunters at 4 as well, half the representation they would have on average. Whereas Guardians and Warriors both jump up to 12 out of 40, a 50% overrepresentation from the average of 8, and essentially the inverse of what mages were doing in the high win rate comps. And while these comps do have low play rates, it's hard to not draw the conclusion that high tank compositions do not perform well. This is likely due to a combination of the fact that a full damage composition will naturally outperform a full tank composition since the tanks can't do objectives or siege, and the general state of the game right now that is just unfavourable to tanks. Jumping up to 1,000 games minimum, we start to see much more normal comps. In fact, there's not a single one here that features 3 of any class, unlike the top win rate comps. These win rates are also noticeably higher than the 100 sample size because, believe it or not, most people want to win their games and generally won't play complete troll comps that have a 35% win rate. We do still see an underrepresentation of assassins and hunters in these low win rate comps, but mages actually come back quite a bit with 10 out of 40, slightly overrepresented. Warriors drop slightly to 8 out of 40, exactly where they theoretically should be, and Guardians remain at the same 12. It would seem that Guardians really just don't perform all too well, especially when there's more than one of them on a team. And to finish off this video, we'll just take a quick look at the most popular comps, since the least popular ones aren't even worth looking at because they have literally less than 10 games total. The most common comp by a landslide is what you probably expected, one of each class. Most likely in their assigned roles, but this comp could also arise with minor switches like a magical ADC and hunter mid, or warrior support guardian solo, etc. You all know this comp, by the data it's over a third of all your games. The next most popular is actually one we've seen before in the highest win rate list, which is Guardian, Hunter, Double Mage, and Assassin. At almost 10% popularity, this comp is absolutely worth considering, and it pretty much just cuts the warrior for a mage. Most likely that mage simply replaces the warrior in solo, but other options are possible like mage support with Guardian solo. This comp is probably the most notable of the entire video, given not only is it extremely high win rate, it also has a very high sample size, meaning it's proven to work, and is probably worth trying for your comps, to be honest. The next most popular comp at 7.5% of all matches is the same, but with the Guardian swapped for a warrior, most likely filling the support role, but again, it could also be a mage support with that warrior in solo. That's pretty popular too. Looking at the overall trend of these comps, we can see that most classes hover around their normal representation of 8 out of 40, which is probably what we want to see for an overall balanced game. Assassins, Guardians and Hunters all sit exactly on 8, while Mages steal 4 spots from Warriors, sitting at 12 while Warriors sit at just 4 out of 40, half as represented as they should be in the most popular compositions there is. This list of the 8 most popular comps covers a whopping 74.02% of all games played, almost 3/4, and there's only a warrior in 4 out of these 8 comps. Granted, the most popular comp is almost half that total number and does have a warrior, but I think this is indicative of a larger problem in Smite. With mages, you can somewhat explain away why they have generally higher popularity. They're a versatile class meant to be played across several roles, with gods specifically designed to cross roles, and they are by far the largest class in terms of sheer number of gods. But with warriors, you can't as easily explain away why they're so underrepresented in the most popular 3/4 of all comps for Conquest. Well, I guess you can explain it, but will high-res ever listen? Jury's out on that one. But that's it from me for this interesting look into Conquest compositions. Hopefully it was meaningful for you, whether you're looking for some wacky high win rate comps to try out in your next game or just wanted confirmation that mages are OP and warriors suck. I hope you enjoyed the video regardless. Catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.